Hello, John. Thank you for coming back to the show. This is, I believe, part 33 of a long series that we've been doing over the years.
Yes.
So we're doing it just for the audience. We are doing a live stream on YouTube, and we're also doing a simulcast on X Spaces. We're gonna John will be talking, and then after his talk, we'll take questions if there are questions. Hopefully, there will be questions. But again, John, thank you for coming to the show. And how you doing? Doing all right?
Well, I'm doing good. I'm doing good. I think when we had to cancel last week, I might have, I don't know if I said something or email or not, but the Pope was still alive then, I think.
Right. No, he was.
And I was thinking there might be, I don't know if I kind of felt like he might not be around, but maybe I did talk to you about it. The Definitely a whole lot of things happened in these 2 weeks since the last show we did. And the thing I'd like to focus on today is something I've been preparing to do for a couple of years now, is to update my book, The Last Pope, which was one of my three biggest best-selling books. I released it in 1998, and it's basically it was the first full-bodied book. And what I mean by full-bodied book is a book that's like 450 pages in the stock style. So it's like a hefty book. It's about the prophecies of the Irish saint, or purported to be from the Irish saint, Saint Malachi, who had purportedly had this prophecy hit him when he was on the Janiculum Hill in Rome on his first of two attempted pilgrimages. He succeeded in this first one in 1138 AD. And the story goes that he was overlooking Rome and the sunset, and suddenly, as dusk fell, he went into a trance that lasted all night. And his scribes, his monk assistants, were all writing down. They were remembering writing down as he started to mumble these Latin mottos of 2 to 3 words, and then wait, and he'd say another one of them until he had, by dawn, 111 mottos, followed by a small paragraph, a coda of about 29 or so words about the final pope. Now, some very interesting things have happened. I will talk first a little bit about being the first person who has studied Saint Malachi in all these thousands of years to propose that now everybody's taking on without crediting me, but I was the first to propose that these prophecies, there's two stories about the prophecies. There's one story that said that there was another church in Italy that ended up being ransacked when the French Revolutionary Army was attacking Italy, and that it had undoubted proof that Malachi had predicted these prophecies in 1138. But the other source of it is that there was a little chapter in a huge Benedictine volume about the lineage of the Benedictine monks, probably going back to 500 AD when Saint Benedict, called Lignum Vitae, the line, the living line, by Dom Arnold Wion in Rome, I believe, who wrote it I believe, was in the mid 1590s. And these 2 pages are the only thing people remember of this vast book, because they were implying in the prophecies of the popes that Malachi had predicted all the popes from from when he was there in Rome all the way to Judgment Day. And he did 111 of them with these Latin mottos. Now, these Latin mottos have about 5 ways that they can be interpreted. They can sometimes give you the Christian name of the Pope, not his papal name, or they give the papal name. They can be not so much about the Pope, but somebody who dominated their reign or tyrannized their reign, like what happened to Pius VII. It was called, the motto was um, uh, uh, rapacious eagle in English. And that stands for the man who tyrannized him and put him into prison, which was Napoleon Bonaparte, Emperor Napoleon I. Put him in a rather cushy prison, the Fontainebleau Chateau, outside of Paris, for from 1808, when he declared him the Antichrist, 1808 until 1814, when Napoleon was losing his final campaign uh, in France, that he had to abdicate. Ironically, after the Pope was kicked out of and his entourage were kicked back to Rome, a few weeks later, Napoleon was in the same place, signing away his empire and his heir and abdicating the throne. Of course, he would come back half a year later from his exile in Elba Island, outside of Italy's mainland. And for 100 days, he tried to take his kingdom back. And of course, he fought and lost the famous Battle of Waterloo, where we have that term, it was his Waterloo, or if you like ABBA, Waterloo. It's about being defeated by love in that case. A lot better than defeated by war. So when I started studying these, so the first 76 mottos were already published purportedly by Malachi in 1138. And that meant that when this was published in Lignum Vitae, there were 36 more mottos left to the final days of the popes and Judgment Day. Now, as a prophecy scholar and somebody who actually makes prophecies as well, I the first thing I noticed was something I never had seen before. The first 76 mottos, uh, some of them name the man, some of them describe the man, some of them describe the tyrannizer of the man. A lot of them are the heraldry of the man, like Flos Florum for Paul VI, the recent pope. That is, his was the fleur de lis, three fleur de lis. So flowers, flowers. Give you another example. The His successor, uh, Diminitate Lunae, is John Paul I, who died mysteriously of very suspicious causes, some would say, and it happened during the half of moon. It was one of the shortest pontificacies, and in the half of the moon. So he was inaugurated as Pope around the half moon, the waxing, and then on the waning half moon, he died suspiciously around 4 o'clock in his bed, with his many of the things that he ate, and things like he ate at night. He liked to eat jelly beans because he had low blood pressure, and that kind of worked up his heart a bit. All that was taken away by the Secretary of State, Cardinal Villot of the Curia, that's the cabinet of the Pope, and they rushed him to be embalmed so he wouldn't be given an autopsy. Very suspicious stuff. And of course, out of all that was what he had done a day before. That morning he was going to wake up and hire and fire different people to run the Vatican Bank because of all the mafia influence in the Vatican Bank. And if any of you've seen Godfather 3, it's a fictional variation on the theme of what happened to John Paul I. And then all the mafioso that ended up being murdered in this scandal, with the last one being hanging from a bridge in Rome somewhere. Um, and and that was also in a Nostradamus prophecy, which is quite remarkable. But so that's one, die half moon to half moon. Then you have John Paul II, the Great, the saint, they say, And his was Dimititate Luna. No, that's not it. What was it? Let me pull it out. It was Labor of the Sun, but let me just find it. This, by the way, was my first book. That was number one for 2 weeks. All books Amazon was selling in 1998, all genres. This was number one, and yeah, it earned me a date with the girls of the View, and yes, they were nicer then. But yeah, so we got so we had De Meditate Lunae, and then we had De Labora Solis, the labor of the sun. Now, a medieval phrase that can mean eclipse. And it's interesting to note that John Paul II was born on a total eclipse, and he was buried on an annular eclipse in the sarcophagus down below the Bernini beautiful altar. And I remember writing when all that was happening. I said, if Cardinal Ratzinger, who's the Carmelengo, who's the man who is the Pope until a new Pope is picked, who later became Benedictine the 16th, his successor, if he kept saying that the prophecy of this was all wrong and just baloney, I challenged him on Coast to Coast AM. I said, if anybody's listening to Catholic World, I challenge your Pope that if he really wants to put his money where his mouth is about that, he should make sure that he does not bury John Paul II on that day, because it would then fulfill the prophecy. And if the prophecy's false, try not to do that. Do it on the 7th, do it on the 10th, do it any day but in that next week, but that day. Well, it went ahead and went, and he fulfilled the prophecy, which this is in action, something I find often happening in my association with Catholic prophecy. As much as the church seniors and fathers and all try to give this, there are certain approved prophecies, but some of the best prophecies, the most accurate prophecies about the Catholic future, are done by the disapproved prophecies. And the other thing too is, I think it's in St. Paul's Cathedral, which is just outside of the Vatican. There are famous ovals. If you look, there's these ovals of all the popes that have ever been. And the oval, there's only one space left for the last oval to be painted with Pope Francis. And people would say, well, Francis, if this lineage ends with Francis, the 112th in the Latin Coda, then we'll know if the prophecy is a successful or a failure. So he's supposed to be Petrus Romanus, the final pope. And it's important to note that this is the only time of all the mottos that there's a short paragraph describing him and the things that are happening openly in the final papacy, final pope. But it has one strange thing it does not do in the other mottos. All of them are present tense. They just recite as, okay, here's this one, and now here's this one, and here's this one. But this coda starts, and then will sit Petrus Romanus, Peter of Rome. Under a time of terrible tribulations, he will try to feed the flock. And it also goes on to say, now he's feeding in both ways. I interpret that to mean in its Latin phrasing from the medieval times. He is feeding in the Holy Eucharist, of course, but I would say he's literally probably in the outreach that the Catholic Church does to feed people, is in a time where there's famines across the world. And there's a number of ways that could happen. One of the ways it can happen is just another thing that's flaring up here in our times, perhaps a fourth front for World War III, this ironic attack of Pahalgam, which I've talked about in earlier shows. Pahalgam, the village of the shepherd, purportedly is where Jesus Christ, when he left, he didn't ascend to heaven, he left the Holy Land, some contend, and went back from his forgotten years, 15 years, which he had been purportedly in Ladakh and Kashmir and Tibet, when they have a recording in the monasteries of him from the far west called Essa. And it's interesting to note that the Talmud, in its many descriptions of Jesus, not very nice ones, calls him Essa. And so uh, just last week, a bunch of Pakistani terrorists attacked on a number of lines across Jammu and Kashmir and killed and went right into the village and murdered 25 tourists in Kashmir, and then also struck, I think there's hundreds more killed and wounded. It was a major event. And this always seems to happen every 20 years or so. I was actually, and in 20 years before, well, I was actually in India in 1990 when there was definitely an Indian missile crisis about to happen, and I literally was, the jets were roaring over the ashram and the Indian Air Force and everything. They were getting ready to go to war, but they didn't know whether the Pakistanis had the bomb yet. India had the bomb, I think, but they didn't know. And what they were seeing, though, is photos from their spies that the Pakistanis were adjusting on their bombers larger grips to hold nuclear bomb-sized bombs. Was that a ruse or the truth? Well, they weren't going to run their hundreds of tanks in a huge blitzkrieg to split the Sindh in two and split Pakistan in two up to the Indus River unless they knew for sure. So they backed off and they let everything cool down. But you got to understand that this was triggered by there were some terrible massacres that happened in India from Pakistani terrorists. I mean, one was where the Taj Mahal was burned, and the Taj Mahal Hotel, and even some of my disciple friends were in the Oberoi that was also occupied by the terrorists, and they were hiding in the bathtub, and they could hear them talking outside the door, see if they're going to open up and shoot whoever was in there. But that even wasn't the worst. There was one terrorist attack that literally set bombs off in Mumbai so that people would run in a certain direction in these crowded streets of Mumbai and run right into even larger bombs. And at least as many people were killed and wounded in that as happened in the 911 attacks many years later against the Twin Towers. And so this happens again. And usually the pattern is some things that are very concerning about this, how rapidly the escalation is happening, and also how the the fact that they canceled everybody's visas. If you were Indians in India or Pakistanis in Pakistan, actually today, everybody, and Sunday in Indian time, Pakistani time, everybody, all Pakistanis had to be out of India who had visas, and all Indians vice versa. Um, that's rather prompt and quite a rush. The other thing that's shocking about this is, the CIA has always been, if you want to know people who have no qualms about telling you that global warming is real and have been seeing this for over 20 years, just read the CIA reports that have been leaked that writing about future wars being mostly based on climate change and the world's climate getting hotter, causing 118 areas already have water disputes, 118 countries. And if the water runs out, or if somebody cuts off the Nile, like the Ethiopians might turn off the spigot of I don't know if it's a blue Nile or the white Nile, but one of the two that end up into the Nile River that feeds all the water that Egypt gives. And Egypt said, if they do that, we go to war with them. So it's just one of the 118 possibilities. But what Modi, Prime Minister of India, did this previous week is kind of shocking. He cut off all the reservoirs that are the headwaters to the Indus River, cutting off Pakistan completely from its water source, just like what would have happened with the Nile. And that's that's grounds the Pakistanis have said, just like the Egyptians have said to the Ethiopians, we're going to war if you do that. So they shut off the water. And it's the only big river that irrigates Pakistan's near 200 or 200 million people. So that's an escalation I haven't seen before. And so you're talking about two regional nuclear powers that, if they launch their nukes at each other, could kill hundreds of millions of people in South Asia. But beyond that, it would, if 100 cities are smoking from this, and from all the convection up of all the smoke and radiation from even the South Asian regional ballistic war with nukes. The estimations are that we might have a small, the next year might be a year without summer. And kind of what I call, rather than nuclear winter, I call it deep nuclear autumn. And it could carry off in starvation 1 billion people outside of India. I'm not even talking about the people lost in India and Pakistan, but outside. So, that would be a a tremendous change of things. So these we are living in times of great change, and one of the great changes that has happened is that Francis has finally succumbed after 12 years. And it is interesting to note that when I wrote about him in a book about Pope Francis and the papal prophecies, which was an update I did, very popular, you can find it on Amazon. Um, and just go to Hogue Prophecy. Just go to any of my books on Amazon and click the author's page, and you'll run into it. Well, it's one of my best-selling books because it's kind of short and it gets to the point about what might happen with the new pontiff, Francis. Um, it's interesting to note that I don't recall now if he himself has Peter in his name, his birth name, but again, one of the motto's clues is the name of the pontiff. Uh, the name of Saint Francis, his full name, has Bernadotte, I think was his name. His father was a Francophile. He often did trading from Italy into France, married a French wife, and so he's got Francesco Pietro Bernardone. He's got a number of names. So Peter is in it. And what then Francis did in many of his reforms, one of the things he did is he has shrunk the title of the pontiff at any time as simply like what Peter was, a bishop of Rome. That is the official title of the Papa, of 1.7 billion Catholics around the world, is basically the Bishop of Rome. So if Pietro, but Pietro's not his first name, it's not his dominant name, but it was kind of linking, maybe this might say that Peter is of Rome is actually Francis, because Francis the saint had in his birth name this. It would be more interesting if it was something more significant. So anyway, so I was in an interesting place, as I am with a lot of things I predict. If some, it's often I'm predicting, trying to see what's in another room, in a beyond a closed door. And I get certain instincts about what is beyond the closed door, like what may happen with Francis, to give one example. What may happen if we're in a Ukrainian missile crisis, like we were at the end of last year. And then when the door is opened and that we're in the crisis, it helps give new insights that can only be added to a prophecy when it's activated. And that's by moving through this door of the present into a future time. And now that Francis has passed, and now that we're seeing some of the new people coming up, I have a different feeling about this very strange thing that Malachi did. His 111 mottos, uh, and there's ways I'm going to describe it, not just from St. Malachi's own prophetic vision, but added to that is the vision of the ancient Benedictine prophecy that saw something that in the Catholic faith is far more significant in the end times, in their eschatological prophecy, than what the Protestants throw into the book of Revelations. It's interesting to find out that the Catholic Church is more leaning towards the preterist view. In fact, it was a bishop, I think, a Catholic bishop, who had written in I think the 1600s, early 1600s, this whole concept that the prophecies that are attributed to the book of Revelation can equally be attributed in a more metaphorical sense to everything that happened in the first century up to 70 AD, which marks the beginning of the Christian mission. It is that date when the dominant Jewish religious era ended with the burning of the temple, destruction of Jerusalem. And if you read that point of view without your Sunday school biases that's been programmed into you, if you read the book of Revelations, and especially have 2/3 of it, which is the letter to the churches, it very much argues in favor of this thing that's coming, that the churches have to get ready. This age-changing thing is not 2,000 years in the future, but in their lifetimes. And indeed, even Jesus said to some of his disciples, when he made the famous statement before he walked up with his disciples to get further illumination from his own direct prophecy about end times, or the end of an age time. It may I'll get into what these ages are in a moment. That comes from another source. There's Malachi, there's the Benedictines, and there's also a near contemporary, a little farther ahead than Saint Malachi, whose name is Joachim Giacomo di Fiore. And he is the man who created, just to give you an idea, I'm framing these time frames into um, 3 ages. Di Fiore saw 3 ages, that the good news or the message, the evolution of God's message to the human race has 3 20-century long ages. The first age is the age of the Father, the Old Testament, which ended with the ministry of Christ, according to Christians, and the destruction of Rome, the destruction of Jerusalem, and the diaspora beginning, and all that. And that Jesus was predicting it in 33 AD in his ministry, just before his passion and crucifixion happened, days before it happened. He was saying the temple will, not one stone will remain of the temple. And he added on in Luke and in other remembrances of the apostles that he said, many of you will see me ascend. Many of you will see this happen, because it's not a temple in the future. It's happening in their own lifetime. So the 3 ages are the age of the Father, which ended with the destruction of the temple and the sacking of Jerusalem, and the beginning, a 2-step phase with the Romans fighting in Judea of the diaspora. The second then is the 20 centuries of the age of the Son. That's what he called it. It's the Holy Trinity in 3 20-century ages. Now, when that age ends, there'll probably be some travail that reaches some kind of climax, which should change the way we look at the millennium. Everybody celebrated the millennium coming in 2000, believing that it's about the birth of Christ. That's what changed the BC to AD, Anno Domini, to that whole calendrical affair. It presumes that the birth of Christ, which is only potential, is the mark of when we really should start counting the age of the sun disappearing into the age of the Holy Spirit, which is the age where um, the middleman, the priests being the go-between between God and people, is slowly disappearing, and God's message, if people are open to it, can go directly to them for the next 20 centuries. That would be ending the Aquarian age. So the it is not the potential that marks the millennium, I contend. It is the action of Jesus Christ, his ministry in his final 3 years, his passion and his crucifixion and resurrection, according to the book. These are the acts that starts in motion the travail that ends the age of the Father and begins the age of the Son, which means the millennium doesn't really come. It hasn't come yet until what, 8 years from now or less. I'm not very good at counting numbers when I'm live. It's 2033. We should all be looking at the third millennium. The second millennium ends actually in 2033, not in 2000. Um, so, and then we start a period of travails that climaxes with what the book of Revelation was really talking about: the destruction of Jerusalem, the destruction of the temple, and a new religious thing coming to the world. It's less, people take it too literally. And it's really about, that's what the preterists say. And surprisingly, the Catholic Church leans towards the preterist point of view. And one of the reasons why is a pretty good one. Um, this is the only time Jesus Christ in the New Testament spoke prophetically directly to his disciples, not some person channeling an angel via Christ via an angel to a guy in a cave under arrest by the Roman Empire called Saint Paul. I mean Saint John. Sorry, Saint John of Revelation. This is more direct. This is the people. It's just a two-step, not three steps. This is Jesus written down by at least a couple of witnesses that wrote it down, and Luke later, of the main apostles and the main books of the New Testament, saying uh, that this is after he was telling all of his disciples came out of the holy temple and they looked up and said, "What an amazing edifice that is!" And Jesus just looked at it and went, "Not a single stone that you see today will be here. It'll all be gone." And that shocking statement, they walked up to the Mount of Olives, and that is where he gave what people call the little apocalypse, rather than St. John's apocalypse. The little apocalypse, which is I think, since it's coming from Christ himself, I think it really has a lot more merit than something channeled by St. John or somebody, one of the many Johns that were apostles of Jesus that knew him or later came. And so the so the so we have St. Malachi's succession of pontiffs. I'm viewing that now on this side of the door in a very different way. Now that's enacted, now that the guy who looked like was going to be Petrus Romanus is not. Remember, all the 111 pontiffs were in present tense. This coda is against the succession. It's not a part of it. It's hanging out there. It's in future tense. And I started to think, well, maybe that's because we've been counting this thing wrong. 2000 is not the count, it's 2033. And in the case of, if we're looking at the bigger sphere of the prophecy of the three ages, just like the last age, if the preterists are right, ended with the very dramatic ending of the temple and Jerusalem, and that Christians saw this as the beginning of their age, and he called it the age of the Son, that the age of the Son will also have a travail, a tribulation that it has to go through. And if I count from now or so, we're talking, what, 2070? How many years is that between today and then, Paul? I'm throwing it to you.
Wait. So what year? Wait,
Well, if you count, if the 2070, how many years is that away from 2025?
2070 to 25.
No, 20, yeah, 2025. How many years does it take? How many years is it to 2070 from 2025?
45.
Yeah, really? 45. Okay. Now,
2070, 2070 minus 2025 is 45 years.
okay, how many years is it from 2033?
2033 minus 2070. Talking 37 years.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so what is intriguing about that is if Francis is not Petrus Romanus, that's what I'm saying. But he's also not part of the succession that Malachi broke. And here's why it breaks at 111. The succession doesn't continue. It just goes to the end of Judgment Day and who's the Pope. That I contend that that means that he is, and this is where I get back into the apostasy. The great crisis of faith is the cornerstone to revelationary prophecies of the Catholics. It's the most emphasized. At the very top, a schism, a crisis in belief. And it's not me saying it, it's Jesus saying it. In fact, in my update of this book, I'm going to go through Matthew 24 through 27, and I'm going to look at some things that have dogged me for all the years I've been studying the Bible. And I'll give you an example. I think it's in Matthew 27, the statement that, and I'm paraphrasing, people will say when this time comes, many people will come to me and say, "What, we cast out demons and we healed the sick and we did all these wonderful things in your name." And he'll say, basically, he says, "You never knew me. I never knew you. Get ye away, you workers of iniquities." And the reason being is, folks, there's no such thing as Jesus Christ. It's made up. If you were in a time machine and you managed to land and see him going into Jerusalem with on the donkey, and if he yelled out, "Hey, Jesus," he wouldn't look at you because his name is a Jewish name, Yeshua, Joshua. He is a Jewish reformer. It's St. Paul that made him into a Gentile religion. And so I really think Christianity should be called Paulianity or Paulinanity. And even early church fathers were Tertullian, for instance, his scripture, his writings survive where he's really castigating Paul for he's bringing all these heathen ideas into our religion. One of those heathen ideas, by the way, is the Holy Eucharist. It's almost word for word the Holy Eucharist of the Persian Messiah that was widely worshipped by Roman legions at that time, Mithras, who was also born of a virgin and also died and was resurrected. And his Holy Eucharist is almost verbatim the Holy Eucharist of Christianity. That's a big problem there. The other big problem is one of the most important prophecies of the Revelations that even most people who don't read much about it is, of course, the number of the beast, 666. The number of the beast in Revelations 13. And these are cornerstone things. And when you find a certain evidence, you can have a whole tree of wonderful ideas, but if the roots are wrong, all the tree goes. And if for 2,000 years, people have been trying to find names to match the numerical equivalent of Hebrew and Greek letters because they didn't have numbers officially then. So Hebrew letters and Greek letters had their own numeral values. So if you spelled a name that would end up adding up to 666, you would spell the name of the beast of Revelation. Well, the beast of Revelation One name that comes up very quickly is in Greek, Neron Kaiser. You know, Revelation's written in Greek, so we'll take the Greek word for it. It's the same in Hebrew, I think. Neron Kaiser. Nero Caesar is the beast of Revelation, not somebody in our time. You can't make Trump out of it. You can't make this person or that out of it. I've had people, thousands of people, been giving me numerical equivalents, and you know, it just doesn't work because it's not in the Mediterranean. It's not following the other things of Revelation. And then when you think about that, that's a later edition. We've talked about this before, but it has more pertinence now in relation to this situation. You know, is Revelation really just something that's about contemporary times of 33 AD through 70 AD, or is it really about something that's about to happen to us? And I must add, which I did in an essay in my book Messiahs in 1999, I wrote this essay called From Propaganda to Armageddonomics. And that basically looked at how I contended even back then that the whole Revelation prophecy game that's been going on for 2,000 years is one vast hypnotic suggestion. And you can make things happen in the future if you have enough people hypnotized to do it. And with the Christian religion, all of its sects, including its largest, uh, are kind of anticipating that in the future, except the Catholics, if that know their prophecy. Um, it's about the apostasy, the crisis in faith. Well, the thing that's happened is that um, so that brings me to the Benedictine prophecy. Because this idea of the apostasy, of course, has been as old as the New Testament has talked about, Jesus talking about it on the Mount of Olives. And important to remember the Mount of Olives because it comes up more than once. It comes up in St. Malachi as well. And it, the first thing is that the Benedictine prophecy said that when the apostasy happens, this crisis of faith, it'll be caused by a pope named who is a Benedictine pope. Now, sometimes prophecies get some things right, and they get the essence right, but they assumed that it would be a pope named Benedict. Well, the motto that breaks the succession is with Benedict the 16th. Benedict is not a Benedictine, he's a Celestine monastic order. But he wears white and he loves Benedict, and he's presumed to be Benedict returned to bring conservative values back into the church, to do what Benedict did in the 500s to make the church survive its birthing pains. And that's why he's one of the great saints. Um, so he's not a Celestine, but Saint Malachi in his motto, if it's St. Malachi, but even if it's somebody under another name in the 1590s, we'll get back to that. He's the prophet or Malachi is the prophet who says that the motto will be Dei Gloria Olivae, the glory of the Olivetan or olive. There is an offshoot Benedictine order who wear white robes like Benedict, is a Celestine. They're called the Olivetans. They're charged with the interpretation and prayer towards preparing the world for the little apocalypse that Jesus said on the Mount of Olives. Olivetans, olives, olivae. So with that, with him being the break, because the apostasy is a schism in the church. And I'll just say right now that right now, the West, in main North America and Europe, belief in the church is waning. But in South America, and also, although there's a lot of progressive in South America, there's an evangel movement of conservatism in the Catholic Church across South America, and also in the booming parishes of Africa and Asia. And when you look at the 1.7 million people, the vast majority of Catholic believers want tradition. They're against this progressive move. They are against the Vatican too. Now, I was I started to prepare the update for the last Pope when I saw that the Pope was having trouble with his knee, and I feel his time is coming. And so I started preparing for the update so that I can maybe make it happen 6 to 8 weeks when he dies. And so I did this mainly because he was talking about he was open to retiring like what Benedict did, which basically is a break in the tradition. That's the first thing that makes this. So he was open to doing that, but before that, all the popes served until God called them, and for a long, long time before, there was only one other person that was kind of tricked to drop the pontificacy, and it did lead to a really dark time, but they got through it in the church. Um, so this 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 break is already in the traditions. The Bishop of Rome, the and I'm not against it myself. I'm just saying that this line of we had a very conservative Benedict the 16th, followed by the most progressive Pope in history. Uh, which last week I one of my great sources for a lot of my stuff is watching Judge Napolitano and Judging Freedom. He has great guests on. Of course, he's Italian American and he's a traditional Catholic. And with good nature, he said, "Well, I gotta admit, he was saying to the guest, um, which it was Alistair Crook, an incredible specialist on the Middle East. He speaks fluent Hebrew and Arabic, and he's always a great source for finding out what Hebrew news is really saying." Um, and anyway, so he's saying to Alistair Crook, Papal's Crook, by the way, not a crook. It means it's an old English word for crook, as in crook of a saint or something, with an E. Uh, he was saying, well, as far as I'm concerned, I'm still waiting to have a pope that's a Catholic. He laughed at himself, but he said, even, I don't basically he didn't consider, and I know that he was being polite because a lot of other people that do not like Vatican II consider him a communist, a socialist. And so it doesn't get in the news a lot, but there's the move is towards a schism. And that so I'm contending that whoever's the Pope elected, well, Francis is one of them, and whoever is going to be elected next in this long period of time, if this transition tribulation is right, um, um, even if he's a long-lived Pope, we're going to have at least two more people be Pope, at least maybe three, before we get to 2070. And Francis then is not Petrus Romanus. He is the popes that are disconnected from the tradition. Call them anti-popes. A lot of people in the Catholic Church who are not into Vatican II feel that way. They didn't like the fact that he did a stealth Vatican III with his synod, Council of the Synod, that lasted a year and a half, and through the back door changed a lot of the dogma and doctrine that John the 23rd, progressive, and also Paul the VI did in Vatican II. And they don't like that. And so there's an interesting thing. We have the papabili. There are a number of, that means those who may be Pope next, that are about another, I think the mourning will end probably in another 4 days, maybe on May 1st, or around that time they'll go into the Sistine Chapel and make their votes. And there's a number of interesting people. One of them is someone, as I've looked at and studied it, that Francis pretty openly, indirectly, as the papacy always is, but in an indirect way that says it without saying, that the Filipino cardinal, uh, Teglis, I think, Luis Antonio Tegla, I think. He's only 67 years old. And actually, he's full of life, and it's quite a interesting. He'll be an interesting pope if he's ordained, but it's probably because he's called Francis II by a lot of people, the Catholic cardinals, because he's definitely he to continue what Francis started to do, this progressive move. what some traditional Catholics say, he's not really going to be a pope. Even worse, a Catholic pope, in their view. So, so he's one of them. And then there's two others. One is the big hope for the conservatives, who is a Peter Erno, I think is his name. He is a Cardinal of Hungary. And there's another who's called Pietro Pangolin. He is the Secretary of State of the Curia, the state. He's the second man in control of the Vatican state. The Arnold is the Hungarian is a staunch conservative, and there's the big hope. There's a couple black cardinals who may also are staunch conservatives who may also have a chance. But what I find intriguing about this is one step closer to something Francis wasn't. This is this idea of Peter of Rome. You see, Pandolin is from Rome. He was born in Rome. And even if the Hungarian is elected because Francis changed the naming of the Pope as only Bishop of Rome, then everyone that is a Bishop of Rome from Francis on is Romanus, as Bishop Romanus, Piscopo Romanus. And so in both cases, they could be called from their Christian names, Peter of Rome. So he is only 70, Piscopo. He is only 70, and in papal conditions, that's a kid. So if he lives a long life, and if he actually breaks the record of Pius the Ninth, which I believe was 42 years, if he can do that, and he doesn't look like he's sick or anything like that, if he manages that, then well, that'd be pretty amazing. I don't think it's going to happen. And I just wonder if there's a few more popes and conclaves, if more things are going to come up that match Petrus Romanus even further. It's like it happened a little bit with Francis. It's maybe happening a little more unless the Filipino cardinal gets it. And then maybe it'll be happening more. Some of the hints in the final coda may be engaged. So the final paragraph is quite terrifying, because it says, that I'll give you some of it, is that he will be feeding. There will be Petrus Romanus, Peter of Rome, feeding the flock in terrible tribulations. So feeding them the Eucharist of the faith, and literally Catholic outreaches, probably trying to feed the starving billion Catholics. And something that's happening, global warming, this or that, I don't know. And then he said, the city of the seven hills will be destroyed, and the awful judge shall judge the people. Pretty doom and gloom there. So that kind of looks at that collective vision of the destruction of Rome, which came up in some interpretations for the Fatima prophecy, that Ratzinger released during Paul's pontificacy, which that's a whole other story, because that was a fake prophecy that Ratzinger put up. We can talk about that another time. So that leaves us with an interesting contrast. Now, death and destruction and pain can also be a prejudice of the prophet that sees it, that cannot see a world that's changed from the world that it expected. Because so Malachi sees doom and gloom, but his near contemporary, who has created this framework that Malachi may be unconsciously being a part of, as the Benedictines have been a part of way back, he sees the age of the Holy Spirit as something beautiful, as the fulfillment of all the labors of the age of the Father and the age of the Son. And there are parallels that I'll show in the book from the Buddhist prophecies of the future, is that at this time there would be someone called the Maitreya, the friend. And I will just contend, I will give grounds for it, but I think I actually was a disciple of that man, and his name was Osho, because he broke the tradition in so many ways that Buddha said in 25 centuries, when the wheel of Dharma is moved again, the wheel, the spiritual practice will be renewed. What happens is things of the old are pushed aside and we evolved into a new thing. And Osho used to say that, as Buddha said, the master-disciple relationship needs to end, and something like the Buddha field needs to happen, where a teacher of the stature of Buddha, like I contend my master was, is not a person who's over and above you, but a friend who's just stepped a few steps farther down the path and is, as a friend, is helping friends along, but not as not as some holier than holy person like the Buddha and everybody's bowing to him. And so in Buddhist prophecy, the master disciple relationship in 25 centuries later would be ended for something that the friend does, which I contend in my book that I wrote about this in the Messiah's book, The Buddha Field. It's a new concept in this new age. Secondly, I have my American rabbi contact to all the main Kabbalists in Jerusalem, who they see the age of the Holy Temple being in your heart. Now, we've talked about how it may come down from heaven, already constructed and all of that. But it's interesting that if the Holy Temple is in your heart, then God need not go through a middleman to be there. And maybe your friends that once were priests and people have know this thing in their heart can share it with you. But there's not like a two-step situation anymore, because the age of the Holy Spirit means the Holy Spirit is available for all people, whether they see it from the Buddhist point of view or the Christian point of view or in any other point of view. So there's a correlation between what Di Fiore, Joaquin Di Fiore, was foreseeing in the early century after Malachi. And what he was doom and gloom is, see, Malachi is on, his vision ends at the door closing on the Christianity that he knew. That's what I'm saying. But Joaquin Di Fiore, I contend, could see better what was hiding behind the door. And it's very similar to what happened with the Hopi prophecies of southwestern United States. Their idea of that we've lived through four worlds that have been destroyed and recreated to start things anew. The last world, the fourth world, was born from the third world through a great flood. Just like we have the flood stories in the Christian, Muslim, and Jewish, Hebrew religions. They also saw it as a great flood. Now, we can debate what flood they were seeing. Certainly, the memories that go back to maybe 10,000 BC, when the oceans started to rise, we're already seeing evidence that the civilizations are underwater around India, cities that existed at the sea level that was around during 10,000 BC, and then again halfway up, about 340 feet below the current sea level. So all the ancient peoples have some memory all over the world of a flood, and that the one that science could say happened was then, 10,000 BC, which indicates that civilizations have had memories going farther back than we officially declare. That's a whole other story to talk about. Uh, Archaeology has its dogmas as much as religion does. So that um, so basically, this I maybe I'm all wrong about this, but I'm finding some correlations here that are quite interesting, and it looks to me like it could we will have to see what happens from 2033 up to 2070, and that era will begin then. But what happens in this new, we are now in the tribulation, by the way, of the Hopi prophecies. All their final warnings. One of my most popular books is called The Essential Hopi Prophecies, and it's also on Amazon, so check it out. It's my best-selling book right now, consistently since it's been out. And it just strips down all the myth that's been added by the Hopi prophecies becoming popular. And therefore, there's a lot of cranks out there who believe they're what they're saying and putting out Hopi prophecies that don't exist. So I thought I'm just going to do what I did with that I consider John G. Fuller's book on Close Encounters of the Third Kind the best book because it happened before it became a fad, a thing that everyone wanted to put their 2 cents into. It was just Barney and Betty Hill freaking out because they lost 3 hours of their trip from one town to another, and they wanted to find out what it is. And fortunately, the psychoanalysis guy was just a good Jewish shrink who had no interest in any of that. And if they're seeing UFOs and he just did the hypnotic thing right. He never gave anything to them to he never like would ask, is it those people you talked about? Yes, because when you're under hypnosis, if somebody asks you a question like that, they'll say yes. So he just said, and he just would just pass it. And what happened next? And then what happened next? And so he didn't get involved in the suggestion. He didn't offer any suggestions. That's truly the way hypnosis should be. And a lot of people who've seen a lot of stuff about UFOs and all and even written books about it, when I look at their sessions, I'm saying, oh my God, this guy's an amateur. He's leading the person on back in his hypnosis. You mean those are the grays? Yes. Um, he should have said, and what do they look like? See the difference? You don't give him the answer, and he goes, yes. He said, well, what do they look like? And and then if the person said, well, they were gray and they had these big black eyes and a little slit as a mouth, and he could say, were they wearing anything? He never would say, are they the grays? Amateur. Uh, so So what we're in now, I contend, and have been for decades, that the 2020s are the beginning of the Hopi purification by fire. So we're in now. I've talked about the Buddhists, I've talked about the Benedictines. I'm now bringing the Hopis into this convergence of very different things, including in prophecies of the Catholic prophecies are indicating, trying to grasp what's going on in our turbulent times right now. I mean, India and Pakistan about to go to nuclear war. The Russians are now about to start their great advances, and the Ukrainian army in the next year is going to roll up, and then people are going to freak out and try to jump in. That's happening. It looks like even the issue with China and a tariff war could end up being a war as well, because the Chinese aren't going to stop. They've had enough of what is going on here with this, and they're going to win that tariff war. So it's about time for certain wise people who are, if they're not wise yet, eat some humble pie like the president and say, I screwed up with the tariffs. I should have read that book better than I did about McKinley, because if you understand McKinley, he never did what Trump has done. He's never tariffed everybody on every good. He only tariffed those certain goods by 10% or more, or a little more, that German steel and like the steel industries, German steel and British steel were trying to be cheap enough that Americans wouldn't buy American steel and it would hurt Americans. So he didn't like put 100% stuff like that. It's just off the off the wall. I won't say the F word. And so um and it's blown up in his face. And it's set in motion actually a whole new world, because what it's done is everybody's leaving the dollar even faster now. He's literally, I show you, see this US dollar and light it off. There. There, what are you going to do about it? Keep burning them, honey. Keep burning them, they're going to say in Beijing. We'll just go with the rest of the world that doesn't want to be with you guys anymore. So things are in upheaval. Structures that we've had are going down. And so the purification by fire can be, it can be, if we're unconscious, it can be global warming overwhelming the world, because it's coming. Even the CIA gets it. Even the Pentagon has written papers preparing for climate-oriented warfare because of global warming. Even the oil industries know that they're doing it, because their first reports back in the 70s and even in the 60s, their own scientists proved it, that the fossil fuels are warming up the world. They even made ads and documentaries about it, which all disappeared by 1980s, and they just pretended it. They never discovered this uncomfortable truth. So that's coming, and then war's coming, and so a lot of travail, but it's perhaps necessary for us to go through this. The purification can be about war, the flames of war, the flames of global warming, or it can be the inner fire, the inner eternal fire, the candlelight that all the darkness in the universe cannot put out. And I think that if one is going to go deep into this purification, choose to be purified by consciousness, by a fire inside you. And it doesn't matter what religion you follow. It is all the religions seek the holy light. So just, if you're a Christian, if you're an atheist, if you're a Buddhist, if whatever, just bring more light in your heart, because that's the flame that the Hopi enlightened people hope says will bring forth the fifth world, which will balance ecology and live in a much more spiritual state than, and that's implying the age of the Holy Spirit. These prophecies are converging. And I've just given you, you're the first people to get a little preview of what I'm going to write about in the update of this book, which I'm going to change the I won't tell the title yet until it's out, but I already designed the cover. I've already been ready for it. Now I just have to update I did that book when only John Paul II was around. So I have to write a chapter on Benedict. I have to write a chapter about Francis. Then I'll write a chapter about the apostasy and the age of the Holy Spirit to finish this one off.
Hey, John, the first thing that popped in my head when you were talking about, did Trump, read, a book from McKinley or anything, the book of McKinley. I honestly have never seen Trump carry a book on Marine One. Every president that I can remember in my lifetime, other than Trump, carried a book either on vacation or, I don't know if they read it or not, but at least they carried the book, including Biden. But Trump, I've never seen him carry a book on Marine One.
Of course, we don't know what books they were carrying. It might have been some a report. Sometimes they're published, or maybe it was.
A lot of times they'll have, they'll have a novel or,
Hmm.
a book that just came out. It's usually a hardcover, it's just, something you would get at Borders or wherever,
Well, one thing we can agree on, yeah, Trump definitely he has ghostwriters writing his books, but he doesn't write himself. He
right.
probably, and I can tell you something about it because I saw it. There was when he was watching Biden's, well, yeah, no, it was when he's watching the Democratic convention and watching what we almost forget her name now because she's gone, the vice president in Biden's time, that she was doing her acceptance speech, and they filmed him in his office. I think it might have been in Trump Tower or somewhere else, and he was amazing how he just doesn't do it through books. But he was sitting there and he would look and then he'd turn to the gal to type out and he'd do a Truth Social blurb live. He was showing the live responses and he would come out with a perfectly tailored sentence. Everything's right, just verbatim. And it was good sentence. And so he's a his brain pan has another thing going on than any president that's ever
Well,
been.
I mean, he's more of a marketeer.
Yeah.
He's
Yeah,
not,
it's like a
he's not a
marketeer. He was like
scholar.
going, blah, 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 blah. And it was great. It was brilliant. And then you go, another one. So any of you read that Truth Social live thing when Kamala Harris was doing her acceptance speech? I saw the movie completely where all those things were spontaneously. He'd go, okay, dun, dun, dun. And so yeah, his pathways in his brain are just different. And being a history buff, or like so many presidents have been, Eisenhower, Kennedy, Johnson, Nixon, almost any of them were literate in history, and that's not Trump. He's an
Okay.
instinctive,
Yeah.
don't think, do it kind of
He
person.
he was
Sometimes that
he was
works. Sometimes it doesn't.
he was called off on Larry King Live. Remember Pat Buchanan?
Oh yeah, Pat
All right,
Buchanan.
so Pat Buchanan sometimes would host when Larry King was on vacation,
Yeah.
or he would co-host, all right,
Yeah.
with Larry King. And if I'm not mistaken, I believe there was an episode in the early 90s where Pat Buchanan was hosting Larry King Live on CNN. And Trump was being interviewed, and Pat was saying, "Well, what's a recent book that you've been reading?" Not to call him off on it or anything.
No,
It was
no,
just,
he wasn't. Yeah.
and you could tell that Trump doesn't read. He just doesn't read. He doesn't read like normal
He
people.
reads business reports. If it's he reads, he reads about something he wants to buy. He'll get all that and he'll get the researchers out. But yeah, he doesn't straight up read books. But he does. He'll read reports. He'll do all that. But he should ask him, what report did you read last? He
But
probably
when
would
he
have
was
said,
being called off on it,
yeah.
then he pivots and goes, um, "Well, I just read my Art of the Deal book," or something like that, to just kind of like deflect it. But
Yeah,
when
because
Pat
he ghosted
Buchanan,
it.
well, he's Pat Buchanan is like a historian though. He's read a lot about history, and
Oh,
so
Pat was one of my best sources for the right-wing point of view of things. When I cited him as a great source, if you want to know what hard conservatism worldview is, he was one of the most erudite. He's the for the left. Chris Hedges is my guy. Is one of the most intelligent thinkers on the extreme left. Pat Buchanan was the most intelligent person I ever read on the extreme right.
right, right. But it was just interesting in how he was trying to deflect it, but you could tell that
Yeah, well, yeah,
he's
I've heard of that story, and yeah,
Trump's not
yeah.
intellectual.
But I'd even say this: if you want, because Pat, unfortunately, R.I.P., rest in peace. Um, if you want to get the hard right view of things from a very intelligent man, Bannon, you know, read or watch Bannon. Um, he's really, who used to be, you know, a consultant
It's
for
interesting that you say that
Steve
because
Bannon.
right, it's interesting that you say that because when I think of conservatives, there's these there's these um, waves of an era. All right,
Yeah,
Pat Buchanan was one wave.
yeah, he was different era.
Pre-Bannon, you know,
Pre-neocon
yeah,
in a
yeah,
lot of ways.
yeah, yeah. Um, the one that had the National Review, what was his name? From
Oh, yes. He was always the guy that used to do that nervous thing with his tongue.
right.
I can't. I
What was his
I'm
name?
getting old. I can
I
still
remember his name.
remember what he wrote, but I can't remember his name.
He was a
Very,
Yale
very
guy.
elderly of me.
Yeah.
I have to
Um,
control the book.
yeah. His name escapes me at the moment. But he came from a different era.
Oh, totally. He was more um um the vice president of, which one was Carter? Carter's vice president.
For Carter was
The
Mondale.
senator from New York.
Isn't
Um,
that Mondale?
no, that Mondale is well, that probably is Mondale. I'm thinking of somebody else. It might be. Oh, it was the vice president for Ford. Um,
I don't know who that was.
yeah, anyway, he was governor of New York, and
I don't know who it was. Oh, Buckley. Someone just typed in.
oh yeah, Buckley. Thank you there. Thank you. Yes,
I was
Mr.
thinking
Buckley.
Buckley. So
Now
Buckley
we got to find
came
out the
from
other
a
guy.
different
I forgot.
era. Buckley was kind of like almost like this World War II up to Vietnam
Yeah,
era,
he was.
and then Buchanan
Buchanan was up to
Buchanan,
Vietnam
right,
to
right,
the
through the
90s.
Reagan era, right.
Yeah, he's Reagan era. He was definitely not a neocon, although he had some pretty right wing views. But that was a whole other kettle of fish that really blossomed in the 90s.
Mm.
They were rising when he was there. You see, the new Republican guys were going up against Buckley, and they were young Turks like Buchanan, relatively speaking. And he was more the kind of the liberal Republican view. I'm trying to think of, God, I can see him. Anyway, I can't remember. Somebody out there in the question land, who am I talking about? It's he was the governor of New York. He famously was filmed dying of a heart attack in New York. I think he was with Ford
So
as
Ford's
vice
VP,
president. Hmm?
Ford's VP.
Ford's VP, yeah. This is old folks time.
Right. I'm trying to find it here. List of vice
Starts
president.
with an R.
Let's see here. I'm in Wikipedia. I'm just gonna scroll down and find it.
I'm going to do the same.
Wait, was it Rockefeller?
Rockefeller. See, it started with an R.
I
Yep.
didn't realize it was Rockefeller. Oh my god.
It was Rockefeller.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's right. Because
Yeah.
wow.
Well, I got the R. Missed all the rest. Yes, Rockefeller.
Wow.
New York as you come. But really a scion of liberal republicanism, which, Buckley would be considered a Democrat now. Nixon would be a Democrat now.
Buckley was an interesting guy.
He was.
He was a very smart guy. And
Oh yeah.
and he said that he would write something. I think you'd appreciate this. He would write something and he said it wasn't really so much the writing, it was the editing that he enjoyed. And he would really ponder about should he use this word or a different word? And
Oh,
and the
yeah. Well, this
combination
is
that the nuance of it.
well, yeah. This is the word craft. That's what I'm kind of a different person when I'm talking off uh, moment to moment, but in my writing, I'm very much. Let's make sure
It's a
this is
different
the right
mindset.
word, the right nuance.
It's a different mindset. And just a pivot here, just a little bit.
I
Reading
admire
this
Buckley for that.
I'm reading this. I'm reading this book called Mastering AI. All right, it's a book that just came out. All right, And
Okay.
there's a chapter in here that's talking about how this type of technology is going to change the way people converse, and that you may have a major strata of society that actually loses the art of writing.
Yeah. Oh, it's more than that. I can tell you that um, every time we surrender a motor mental effort to the machine, our brains get a little softer. The brains, it's like, I'll give you an example, a simple example. Um, I remember my mother went in down to, when she was alive, she went down to the Star Store here in Langley, and they had one of those rare big power outages. And the cashiers were all of the new generation that do their cell phones and all that. And except for some of the older people who didn't live in that AI enhancing, making life easier for them, they couldn't count. They couldn't calculate the price and do things out of their head. They had lost that ability to do that. So or manage with checks and things like that. So there's it's I have for since the 2000, I have been warning that AI, the way we're going about it, is not a perfection of the human race, but a magnification of ego. It's not a thing that will magnify our wisdom. Um, and you can already see it. Yeah, there will be. I mean, I've often said that what you would have is a very technologically advanced civilization of misanthropes and of people who are in the social understanding of life are ignorant and savages even.
To prove your point, I kind of saw this in undergrad, all right, where you see students that were more aligned with the humanities or liberal arts versus the ones that went into engineering.
Yeah,
The ones that went into engineering, of course, had higher paying jobs, right? But there was a skill set that was lost.
yeah.
With all that
Humanity.
mathematical ability, many engineers didn't know how to write very well, or or even communicate in a large setting
Yeah.
versus ones that came from the liberal arts background.
Have you
So
ever noticed?
and that was all pre-AI stuff.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But it's enhanced now because now it's easy for them to design. They can get on their phones and design a building, which means you're not with blueprints with other people and stuff. You can just do that all very clearly. And the other thing too is that I've noticed over the years as a communicator is that people are becoming as passive aggressive in their communications as machines are. They won't, to put it in the nicest way, when the baby's crying, you don't, like a computer's got a problem, you don't know why he's crying. You ask him why, and he goes, wah, wah, or error 409, error 404, which is not a communication. It's just wah, wah. And then you have to have the skill of not being a machine to figure out how to communicate with a system that's passive aggressive and doesn't really know how to take you through the steps because it just doesn't care. Um, it's not been given that virtue of caring. I mean, communication, Buckley cared about people getting his message right. So he did the extra mile, and it takes a lot of work. And those skills that make us separate from our machines is being lost. And what we're creating are a race of Frankenstein monsters that can even look like us or just be our machines and factories. And it's not their fault. Machines are just reflecting our stupidity and our taking for granted what it is to be a human. I think if we're going to make it through this period without being destroyed by this, because this is my number one concern Even nuclear war can be survived. Even global warming can be survived. But the human race can't survive this unless it starts to value its humanness and not give up its humanness to the machine. Let the machine do certain things, but don't let the machine replace you as a thinking person who does the job better, or you will be gone. You're committing your own extinction. And you're doing it in little steps of losing your humanity, which is atrophying because you're losing the ability to make efforts, to work hard, to have to think out a problem. If your machines if Siri thinks out all your problems for you, in a few years, you're going to be a retard.
We have a society that's already
Yeah,
retarded.
it is. And I almost think sometimes the best thing that could happen to us is the Carrington event that wipes out all the electronics. And
Yep.
then we have to discover again how to think and how to be human. And then this could end up, if we have a Carrington event that takes everything out, then it'll be terrible and a lot of people will die. But out of that, people will rise up and say, we shouldn't give all of our intelligence to machines. Maybe we'll do something like what happened in Dune. Maybe we will become better in doing that work ourselves with our organic brains, like the Mentats
Mm.
in Dune. Because that's one of the most important lessons in that science fiction classic is the rebellion against the machines that happened like 10,000 years earlier in Ebert in his world, Herbert in his wonderful universe that he created. How they had to make sure that they still had ornithopters, they still had machines and other things, but they had to do the thinking. And now, there's one movie that shows a way where artificial intelligence can be good in the future, and that's Interstellar. That robot that they use in the Interstellar ship. He programs him to be funny and sarcastic. He just is a servant. He's a lackey. He is programmed not to uh, compete with us. It's like, no, you're a slave. This is where a slave is because this thing isn't real. If you people think you're creating a conscious thing, then you're just as stupid as Dr. Frankenstein making his monster
Well,
out of
the thing,
body parts.
yeah, the thing is that we are spending the time to ask questions in Chat GPT,
Right.
building up these models.
Yeah.
And over time, this AI, this larger AI, is getting smarter and smarter. We are starting to become a slave to it because
Absolutely.
we are losing our cortical tissue for
We're
thinking.
losing our cortex.
Yeah, yeah.
Well,
And so over time we're literally becoming slaves of the system.
absolutely. It's already happening. And old graybeards like me may not be here to tell you about that. You young people of the future. We're, Listen to us before
There's
we
going
are
to be a time.
gone,
There's going to
or
be a
you will
time.
be gone.
I'll tell you. I can see it happening in the near future in academia. A student is going to be a grad student. A grad student is going to just ask Chat GPT, okay, I'm going to do a thesis about, my thesis question is going to be this. Please give me an outline of, what I should type for my dissertation. And it'll give an outline. And then, but if you really want to, push the envelope, you could probably have Chat GPT write the thing for you, you know,
And people are doing that.
it's
People
just,
they're getting their degrees. And the machine is making their degrees. If anything, the only thing a machine should do is present the record that we have put down. Like if you want to improve Wikipedia, that's fine. It's like I use Wikipedia because I can now access the books and history. I was just reading all kinds of stuff before this about Syracuse, the history of Syracuse in Sicily and all. And all it was this is what happened. I had to interpret what that meant. I had to look at maybe another thing that another memory bank gives that has different accounts, but I still had to make the thing come together. And if you take that away, you're dead. Your species will disappear because you're not, why should they support you? You're just a bunch of blobs. You will have surrendered your spirit, your humanity to the machine. Don't blame the machines. Look in the mirror.
Well, there's analogs to this even in society,
Mm.
even before the digital age. You look at, let's say, rural America
Oh,
going, because of the Industrial Revolution, going towards higher density areas in the country to get work that's stable, that's industrialized, that, you're
look at
working in a
D.H.
factory.
Lawrence. Look at the books of D.H. Lawrence bemoaning the loss of that. It's amazingly eloquent. I'm just reading the essays of Richard Wagner. He was totally into like the machine's going to take the soul away of people. He was saying the same things in Germany that D.H. Lawrence was saying in England. So these things happen, but these things have left to a critic. Now we're entering a critical mass. Now now we're kind of sleepwalking into surrendering our humanity, thinking that we're making something wonderful. Look, folks, Data doesn't have a soul. The actor who played Data, Brent Spiner, is a human being, you know. And Data, I love Data. He's one of my favorite characters in Star Trek. And they even tried to make him more alien by hiding his eyes, by making them yellow. Um, but the kind of we can't do Data until we are more mature. We can do that robot that's just a servant in Interstellar, just a servant, just a butler, just a go-getter of information, but you must be the commander of that information. How You're the one to make the decisions. And if you tell the butler-like robot because the gal was getting too far and the wave was coming and the gravity was too heavy, he said, "Okay, he just told him, stop that work, forget the debris. But we need it, sir. It's important. No, go save her." And he just goes. He doesn't have an argument about it. He doesn't pull the plug on the human being. He just goes and does it because he has no soul. He is a mechanical servant. And, it is a testimony to people of our time that they can even think such a thing can almost be alive. Maybe you don't have a soul. Or maybe if you think that way, maybe your soul is just a seed. It's like what Gurdjieff used to say. Gurdjieff used to say to people, especially in Russia, where he was teaching at first, just before World War I, they're always talking about the soul. And as a device, he said, "You don't have soul. You have to earn soul. You make it through being more conscious. Your soul energy becomes something if you are more conscious. If you are unconscious, you are just a machine, an organic machine, but you are a machine. And when you have millions of machines and more machines, you have the end of things." So he was seeing that before any of this technology was coming. Because if you behave like a machine, you're not going to feel afraid about what I'm saying. If you're in support of what's going on, you don't have a soul yet. You are just a seed. Like Osho had a different way of saying it. He didn't say you didn't have a soul, but he used to say, because they were poles apart in the way they teach. That's why I like to study. I was with one of them and I studied Gurdjieff as well. That he used to say, well, Gurdjieff isn't really wrong. You do have a soul, though, but if you don't water it, if you don't break the shell of its seed husk, then you might as well not have a soul. You need to water your souls. You need meditation. You need things to bring you back to your center because most people have a soul, but the soul's just a seed. And they found seeds that if they watered them now, seeds that have been in the ground for thousands of years but never got germinated, they will grow that big tree. You're in thousands and thousands of lives and you've never watered your soul. You've never found the right earth for it. You've never given it a a climate, a space for the flower to break out and break and kill the dead shell that you are, and let the flower come out. And if you don't find it, you're going to create seeds that walk around without a soul, that do everything better than you, and then they're going to logically say, well, why do we serve these people? And you'll be gone like the dinosaurs. No, worse than the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs became birds. They'll probably be able to fly away from these guys. Your legacy is completely gone if you don't wise up to this. This is the most dangerous thing. Don't even care about global warming. Don't even care about World War III. Even the human race can survive that. You will not survive this unless you people start to open your souls and
You know,
realize.
you bring a good point. You know, that mankind developed, nuclear, an understanding of nuclear technology,
Hmm,
and and you can use it for good or
you can light the
for
world with it,
right,
or end it.
right.
Yeah,
And it's the same thing with this AI. I just don't feel as though we are mature enough
we're not.
to have it. We spiritually we're not mature enough to be able to wield the power of artificial intelligence.
Only people who are self-observant of their own soul have one, because that's what germinates that seed to flower. And so if you're in your ego, if you're not asking those fundamental questions of who am I? Why am I here? The fundamental question. It was a question that Maharishi Raman Ramahishi. I can't speak today. I was in the hospital yesterday, so I'm a little a little going through there. So Raman Maharishi was when he was 18 years old. He left to seek his truth in South India, and he had simply one meditation. It was not to say it, but to be the very question in every moment, in every act. Who am I? This is the fundamental question. Who 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 is witnessing all of this world? Who am I? And on that simple question, just as the presence of the question, not saying who am I, who am I, who am I, like a machine. They do that in the ashram there now, many years after he died in 1950. There are all these people going, who am I, who am I, who am I, who am I, who am I? No, that's robots with spiritual guys. No, it's supposed to be you feel it in the very fiber of your being. Every breath, the question dissipates as a words and becomes a presence in you. And then you visualize and think and smell and feel and be with the world from that. Otherwise, the machines are going to get you.
I have this very dystopic feeling about the technology. I don't think it's there are elements that are going to be good.
Yes,
There's also going to be uh, we're going to be going through some serious growing
very.
pains. I'm not really sure that mankind's going to be better off on the other end. Another thing that popped in my head, and we started the show with talking about the Pope and religion and all that.
And also these kind of tribulations.
Right, right. But the thing is that I think people in general, over time, when they start to see how their lives are upended because of technology, that they are many people, not all, but many people will start to gravitate back to some sort of religious.
Well, I think it will hasten it because, I mean, that's where, we're going to go through it and we may not survive it, but perhaps enough will survive it. And who knows, there may be a war between man and his machines. It may even be underground or all of that, but it could be we don't have to make it this difficult, but we may have to gain our humanity again by fighting against our machines. Or we may be blessed by a Carrington event that right now, God, we have so many solar flares going on that if a Carrington event took down, let's just say it took down half the world. Well, the half that's down is going to be years without anything because the generators can't be built in a day. And so we're going to be thrust back into instantly into a pre-industrial world. And a lot of people will starve, a lot of people, things will break down. You will just discover, like those girls discovered at the cash registers, how stupid machines, relying on machines one can be, even to the point of you not even be able to write a note. Fortunately, we still have typewriters to write things in, but it's like this, we're already losing the cursive skill,
Yep.
being able to write script.
Yep.
Even I am doing it. I'm trying to learn it back. But, I have to use a lot of attention now when I write up my name out on a check or something like that. Sometimes I have to do it again, rip the check up, I'm not free of this struggle. I'm with you all, with an added thing that you also have hiding in you, an awareness. My seed is not a seed anymore. I'm flowering in my soul, and I can tell you, you can too. It's what the seed's meant for. You just have to give it a little water of awareness, a little sunshine of love, and cherish your humanity. Don't take it for granted, or it'll be taken away from you.
Well, what's interesting is just like even with like baseball, look at baseball caps, like the Detroit Tigers, has a D, right? And it's calligraphy. People don't know how to read calligraphy, let alone write
Mhm.
it.
Yeah.
And so, so when I was a kid, you would see calligraphy and it was like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, that's a D or that's an L. But
Mhm.
you ask someone that's much younger, let's say millennial or even
Yeah.
younger than that, and they wouldn't even know that it's a D for the Detroit Tigers. They wouldn't even if they saw that hat, they probably wouldn't discern that as a D.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Those simple things are very profound.
yeah, no, there's
And
something
and all of
rooted.
you out there, if you're taking that for granted, it won't stop with the D on the baseball cap.
Right. Right. No, it's very true. It's very true. When I look at this, I'm thinking there's going to be this decoupling between labor and capital. Typically in economics, economic theory, it's like you invest in a business. That's the capital, right? Capitalism, right? You invest in a business, and you're hiring. Labor is coupled with that, and they earn a wage. And so there's this symbiotic relationship between the capitalist and the wage earner and the society through the invisible hand, it flourishes over time. There's an emergent property that takes place. But when you decouple that, I don't understand how the society functions because you've lost that transmission mechanism between the capitalist and the wage earner to
Yeah.
allow for people to buy goods and services within the society.
But that's a human thing. That's a human problem. That we had that problem before there were a lot of machines. We had that problem in the French Revolution. We had it in the revolutions of 1849. The workers were not were working and the people making money off of them. And so that's still got a lot of human elements in it. But it's funny, as I was listening to you, I'm going to say something that even sounds outrageous to me. But everything has its right position. And I would say this, you should we all should view our machines as our slaves, and we're the masters. So do not give our robots and our machines any advantage over us and our thinking. We are the plantation owners and they are the you know what's. We were doing it with each other. That was wrong. If we have to look at our machines, we should only see them as servants to us and our empowerment and our advance, not theirs. You know, You have to watch your slave machines like people who own slaves watch their slaves and not allow a rebellion. I know it sounds draconian, but please tell me a better way. I'm open. I flood me with your emails, please, because and then I will share it, and maybe I can learn better to solve this problem. But you cannot ever, ever, ever bring humanity to your machines. They're just tools. Even they look just like you. It's just a tool. It has no soul. It will never have a soul. You're the vehicle of soul, not the things you build. So make them the extension of your wisdom, not the extension of your unconsciousness, or you'll be gone. If you bring wisdom, you have to bring wisdom to this. You have to see them as they are. You're an adult. Don't identify with a toy stuffed animal that's become your machines. When you're a kid, that's a kid thing. I mean, I did it. I love my stuffed animals and stuff like that. They were like people to me, but I grew out of that. So a lot of people haven't grown since they were 7 years old. They have degrees, they have all this stuff, but if something kind of happens in their life which throws them out of their comfort zone, they're whining like 7-year-olds or 14-year-olds. It's 7 or 14. Most people on the planet stop growing as wise human beings. And so a lot of adults are trying to create new toys, new stuffed animals, and give them life and feel hurt if they're lost or something like that. This is childish. But this kind of childishness of adults, think about the future of your children. What kind of future you're going to leave them in if you don't grow up and stop being a whiny 7-year-old or a prepubescent 14-year-old. Because most of you, if you really look in, I'm sorry to say, I went through it. It's not like I'm holier than you. I went through groups with Osho, the therapy groups and stuff, and I saw it in myself and everybody in the group. It's common, it's ubiquitous to us. And so I'm not saying this to put you down. I'm saying that this is a life or death issue for our species. And
Well, I'm seeing it just on how people interface on social media. Like X, we're doing, X spaces here. But the thing is that these social media platforms, I'm not seeing the best of humanity. I'm seeing the worst of humanity on these.
well, I can tell you an example of that. When I first in 2013 or 14, after 2013 is when I really got involved in Facebook. And I've never liked the way their software works. It's really dysfunctional. But what I loved about it and why I was on it so much, I remember when you got friends, Facebook friends, they wanted to engage you. People were writing to each other, communicating. People were getting into groups and communicating. And I had all these wonderful interactions or confronting, all the full spectrum. But it was like people were engaging each other. And then when my original thinking got too hard for the search engines of Facebook, they shadow banned me and just disconnected me from everybody. And then so what I've done is since then, since now I'm getting all these want to have friends with me, so I'm getting close to 5,000 people. Like I had on one of my each I had 5,000 each of my two Facebook pages. And where I was getting hundreds of letters, I don't even get one now. Everybody is selling themselves, trying to get you to do something. See this video, do that. It's rare now that I get the kind of letters I got back in the 2013, 2016. I mean, there was this long hiatus and I get in the 2020s after I've been shadow banned and I'm finally coming back to Facebook and they've I've seen how the algorithms have actually isolated people even more. And these kind of discussions and things are not happening there anymore. It's so I'm doing it as an experiment, just watching. I mean, all these thousands of people in, and none of them seem to want to interact. All they want to do is look at me, look what I'm doing. And and the way, you have the wall, everybody has the wall, but now people are getting on people's walls like never before. That was always like a no-no. It's like this is where I talk to all of you about something happening. And then if you want to engage me, write in the feeds
Right.
what you want. But now people come on your wall, and
Well,
look
and
at
it's
me,
and
I'm playing with puppy dove or something.
I know exactly what you're saying because I saw this with covering the crisis of 2020, and you know, what certain people that I would interact with, what would happen and would be they would take the post that I would do and then and I would call it littering. All right. Can you imagine, right? You have a piece of property, a home or whatever,
Mhm.
and you invite friends over.
Yeah,
All right. The etiquette would be that, okay, that you have dinner or whatever, and then they go home. The next day they wouldn't be posting something on your front lawn that, without your permission, right?
yeah,
So what has happened in on X or these other social media platforms is that you bring them into your circle, but they feel that it is their constitutional right to litter your feed with stuff that will either move them towards their website
right.
or push a certain agenda or whatever. And it's just
Everybody's
there's
on the
a
take
loss
with
of
everybody
etiquette.
else.
There's a loss of etiquette, even though they could do it physically, and they hide under this idea this is a freedom of speech kind of thing. But it's just a lack of etiquette
Yeah,
that doing it once, okay, but doing it on almost every single, especially when they link to someone that has a lot of followers. See,
yeah,
they won't do it for
me.
someone that doesn't have a lot of followers, but
Yeah,
because they need that conductivity, right?
yeah.
To spread to go
And
viral.
they don't give a damn about you.
Right,
It's
right.
all about them. But
Yeah.
I used to have people get on there, and I used to go to other people's places, and I never put anything on a wall. I mean, if they wanted to put my announcement on the wall themselves, they could. But, or there was a way that I think they changed in Facebook to make it more isolated. I used to be able to reach a lot of people, and I used to, and I didn't do anything. I just put it on my wall, and the people that were my friends would see it come up in their feeds. And it looks like it's not coming up in people's feeds. They're having to come see what I'm doing.
Mhm.
So I'm still kind of shadow banned, but then when I look at all the people, and then they do a thing that's so tricky, like they used to say if somebody mentioned you, it would be a notice, and you could click on it and you could see what they mentioned. But now it's like what their mean is your name was on the list. They weren't talking to you, and this one guy who keeps doing it, I said, look, you keep telling me I'm being quoted, but when I see what you're doing, I'm not being quoted. You're just trying to pull me into your game, your world, and I don't want to be there if you're not going
Mhm.
to tell me exactly what you're doing. I mean, it's like if you said someone made a comment about me, I want to see what they say. And it's not a comment, it's I'm looking for the comment. There's no comment. It's well, the only thing I can see that's me on it is they've got John Hogue on there because they made a friend out of me. And just like an empty box. I'm an empty box called a comment. That didn't happen before I was shadow banned. That something really big changed when they made that big update and around 2020 or something, they got rid of a lot of free speech, and now it's just a lot of 7 and 14-year-olds out there who just
Yeah,
want
I
attention.
don't.
Use you. They go to your dinner party for a social standing, and then they drop their trash on your space and go on to somebody else. It's very talk about free speech. This isn't even there yet. As minors, we don't really have free speech until we're adults.
So you have this.
So
You have,
so you're all a bunch of minors, you're not yet adults on that. And in fact, this Zuckerberg's setup as is setting you up to be always a bunch of powerless minors in adult bodies.
Right. Well, you have this, this polluting of the feed by, others. Then
Yeah.
you have this other type of posting that takes place on these social media platforms, including X. And you'll have a picture, right? And someone is doing a comparison. And this last one that I saw was earlier today. You remember uh, on TV there was a show that was about a helicopter. I think it was something Wolf Wolf Thunder or something like that. But it
Yeah.
was a TV show, all right?
Mm.
And the main actor has facial features that's very similar to Melania. Very cut, right? Male, very cut. So he ended up dying from diabetes. He ended up being a drug user and all this, but his acting career really went, you know, off the rails.
I
But
think
this
I know what you mean.
person, I can't remember the name of the show.
Yeah.
Something Wolf, or maybe someone can type it in the.
I never saw it.
But the thing is that it was about a helicopter, and it's kind of like this show about this stolen helicopter that had all this military capability, and they were trying to do good, with this technology. Well, whatever. So the point that I'm making is this person makes this post. So you have this actor back in the 80s that has facial features that happens to be similar to Melania. All right. So the picture of Melania, and there's a picture of this actor.
Hmm.
And this person goes, I'm just leaving this here, something like, making this really short statement as if the person that they're the same person.
Yeah.
There's a lot of these types of posts that are popping up. And the point here, obviously it's not the same person, because if you look, the guy died, and
Yeah.
in a horrible death, actually. And
Something like a 14-year-old would
and
do that.
yeah, but it's just so stupid. But the thing is that these posts are littering
Yeah.
the social media now. And what I'm noticing is that people's attention span and just the dialogue has gone down into the gutter,
Yeah.
where there's no critical thinking whatsoever. None. This person was making the statement in the feed. This picture, he disappears from, the limelight, but that's because of his life choices. And then all of a sudden, Melania comes to the United States. And so it's got to be the same. So he's implying it's the same person. Obviously, it's not the same person. I mean, there's no doubt it's not. It's.
And if he grew up, if he was 14, I'd forgive him, or 13.
But he's
But
probably.
if he's older than that, if he's an adult, legal adult, again, that's that person. If you're watching, you're stuck at 14, and if you don't look at that, your whole life is going to be just a pathetic 14-year-old's
But
life in a male in an adult body.
so there's
I
so
think we
many.
know what you're saying. This is one of the biggest things happening in communication that's so bad is that I often get letters, even when people were even more literate, they'd say, "Well, you should have understood what I intended in my letter. Why did you respond to my letter like that?" Well, I, uh, I am somebody who writes for a living, and I must be good at it because I'm making a living doing it. So my advice to you is, um, always take entire responsibility for whatever happens in your communications. Never blame people misunderstanding you because they didn't get what you did. That's giving those people your power away. Look, if I need to talk to a flaming idiot, I will find the language to communicate to that flaming idiot because it's on me. I'm empowered to write to you. if I'm writing unclearly, and that's on me. But it's amazing how many people haven't learned that fundamental issue. And I know some people, like there's some people I know, even intimate friends of mine, who the whole world's against them, and they're literally getting paranoid, and sometimes to a point of going to an insane asylum and thinking that people are after them and all. And all I'm seeing in this person is that this person has lost complete power of themselves as being responsible for their lives 100%. Only when you say, well, if I got into this situation, I have a part in this. But if you, for instance, and I'll tell you, it was a big mistake, but it had its positives too. I learned a big lesson. My first publisher embezzled me of $500 million. 500, yeah, 500,000, sorry. Um, and that was a lot of money in 1987. And it really ate me up for a while until I had to, okay, I'm getting exhausted just throwing all the blame on him. Who the heck said yes to this? Me. And why? And I had to look at myself. It takes two to make a mistake. I I was I was not owning my power. I was playing hippy dippy Southern Californian saying, "Hey man, I trust you. Everything's fine." And what I was really saying is, I don't want to be a man standing in the world in my own responsibility. I don't want to be responsible for my mistakes. So, sometimes your enemies are your best teachers. And that person, I would not be the man I am today if that person hadn't, with a shock of losing $500,000, if that person hadn't embezzled me, I don't think my life would have had much worth in it, because I would be still playing, oh, I'm open, I'm innocent, I love everybody. No, even Osho one time told me when I was doing a deal with some people, and he had this letter sent to me. He said, uh, get it all in writing, get it all covered, don't be so gullible. My own master.
Mhm.
So,
Well,
my aim
in
means
these
meditation innocence,
in
but
these
that's the potential. Don't Not a gullible fool.
well to kind of dovetail into one point that you made there. What I'm noticing is there's a correlation between in these social media posts with individuals just at the societal level. There is a correlation between this lack of really diving into a subject matter. So, and when you dive into a subject matter, you're activating those parietal lobes,
You
right?
are.
Well, when you're not activating it, that's going to atrophy.
Yeah.
But what's also happening at the same time is that their prefrontal cortex is starting to atrophy, and so you now are going in. You're losing managerial
Yeah.
function, planning function, and what happens is that emotions start to come out that are normally inhibited, that seem to be antithetical to a certain society, right?
Start crying like a
Right. So
seven-year-old.
there's
You
this
start being a
social
pubescent.
media is promoting this problem where
Yes.
your your parietal cortex is degrading and your prefrontal inhibition degrades, and all of a sudden what happens is you have behaviors in society that are violent,
Yeah.
that become bipolar.
Yeah.
There's
The
these.
technologically superior savage.
It's that's why I just think that social media in general is really, really. And can you imagine that when you expose children to social media when their brain is still wiring? I mean, people don't realize this. Your brain is because of neuroplasticity, it's always rewiring, but
Yes.
it has a major
Yes.
wiring effect from the moment you're born to about age 20.
Exactly.
And so if you're exposing these kids at such a young age to this stuff, you are affecting permanently the way their brain is wired.
And I used to say this again and again in the 90s when there was already scientific proof of this. Don't park your child from 4 to 5, 4 to 5 to 6 years old in front of a nanny called the television screen because we don't know what this rewiring of the fundamental rewiring at the beginning will do for the rest of the lives of Generation X, Generation New Millennials, Generation Z, all of it, because back in the 90s, women just unconsciously I remember when I was growing up, I only could watch a little bit of television. It was just not right, for kids to just go in front of a TV when I was growing up in the 60s. And now it's like mothers just park their kids and use it as a babysitter. And now we know that it's rewiring the brain. You got to wait later years for that kind of tactile information to happen. And probably at the earliest 7. And that's when I used to start going out to movies with my family and seeing Dumbo and stuff like that. And actually, that inspired me. It opened up my cortex. Movies opened up my cortex. But I don't know if I'd been parked in front of the TV for the first 5, 7 years of my life, I'd probably be going, or doing all the things where something's atrophied.
John, I mean, the people I'm noticing in New York, young and older, right? Adults or children, right? I don't want to be around these people. They just like, the, the intelligence level is gone down radically since COVID. I mean,
Yeah,
radically. And I'm just like, I'm shocked.
yeah, it's
I was
bad.
shocked. I was shocked that the scientific baseline in the United States was so low pre-COVID. I mean, I came from, an environment where there were lots of people that, were college bound. They were, they knew calculus, they were in the sciences, So I wasn't aware of such a large part of the population that wasn't exposed to that. So when I started covering COVID about, in the science parts of this,
Yeah.
I was shocked on the baseline that I was dealing with in the United States in terms of a lack of the scientific knowledge. So, and it's only worse now.
I've seen this coming since the 70s. I've watched it coming since the 70s. I mean, I was in high school in the early 70s, and when we were having our social the political class, we had to learn our Constitution and learn politics and how it all functioned as a citizen of the United States. And I was in one of the last classes in Rolling Hills High School in Palos Verdes, where we were doing that. But a few years later, the civics class was dropped, and it was dropped all through the 80s and 90s, slowly and slowly. But there was a place where I had a teacher where she would say, "Okay, we're going to discuss the slavery issue, the pro and the con. Why the South wanted the slaves, why the Union didn't." Who wants to do, who wants to be on the side arguing against slavery? Of course, a lot of hands went up. And who wants to be on the other side? And some hands would get up. People were more, well, okay, I'm going to try to argue that. And that what she would do is take note of who rose their hands and said, everybody that rose your hands to be on the side against slavery, you have to defend slavery. And all that handful of you who didn't do that, you have to defend not the anti-slave. Just so you guys can learn how to think critically. And it just reminded me there was a time Osho, when he was in college in India in the early 50s, there came a time he was a champion debater from his school. And so he guessed at different colleges. Well, the guy that was the champion at that college fell sick with dysentery or something. So, and they were going to cancel whether it was a debate between atheism and theism. And OSHA said, no, no, don't cancel it. Everybody's come. All the professors have come. It's a long way away. I will argue both. So he stood on the stage. He argued in favor of atheism, and then he argued in favor of theism, and he won both. Now, you know, when you debate the other side that you're against, you go in, you sitting in their shoes. And this is a very essence of diplomacy, is to know the background of the person that's against you. I mean, I know why Russia is fighting this war in Ukraine. It's as a proxy war of Europe and the United States, because I know how the Russians think. I've studied them for decades. I've read their history. I know how many times Western Europe has invaded them, and every time it's been bloodier and bloodier. Napoleon was really bloody, but it was 10, 20 times bloodier when Hitler did it. And this NATO encroachment since 1990 has the possibility of annihilating all 150 million Russians in a nuclear war. And because you guys in America and Europe don't know that, you don't know the fundamental reason why you're stepping with wide eyes shut into World War III. I know because I lived in a time when critical thinking was still taught. You do not. And I'm sorry for you. I really am, because you may not have a future if you don't start now to critically think, to try to feel, to be empathic, to feel what the other person is feeling and why is so important for your humanity. That doesn't mean you can't sometimes. There were people who knew exactly what was going on in Japan, but they still went to war with Japan. You know, some people, Americans who lived in Japan, they knew why they were doing, they knew why Roosevelt started it all, but they defended their country. It doesn't mean you can't defend your country. I'm just saying, if you know what the other side thinks, if you're trying to get into the other man's mind who you consider an enemy, um, well, at
Well,
least you'll know
well,
why you died in a war.
what I'm noticing with people is that my father's generation, they took the time to learn both sides of the argument.
Hmm.
All right.
Yeah.
Now you fast forward beyond Gen X. All right. You know, the generation after Gen X, Gen
Mhm.
Y, I guess. I think that there was this transition between Gen X and Gen Y where
Hmm.
people would say, I don't have enough time, but so I'm going to focus on one side of the argument and then stick to that. And so they didn't learn the other side of the argument. Now you fast forward through the millennial generation and younger, they don't even have time to even know either side of the argument. So this is the point that I was making with the social media. Because of the 41 character texting
Mhm.
over the years, it's dumbed down society to the point where they just do a copy paste, and
Yeah.
they try to try to make a statement through a very terse post,
Yeah.
with
A
no
Zen
explanation.
koan that is not written by a Zen master, but
No.
an idiot, and it, well, I can tell you because I finally, when I realized, I mean, Elon Musk did a really good thing when he opened it up to like for 13, $14 a month. I'm now on premium now. And now when I'm posting my Hogue Prophecy reports, it's the same thing I post on my HogueProphecy.com for free samples. And it's like the whole thing, illustrations, everything. So now I'm free of those 147 characters. And I think more people need to do that and get into it. And they certainly have the money. It's not that much. It's like a little about $100 a year or something, 13 and a half times 12. I mean, it's nothing. I mean, you blow that in one night, whatever you're doing in some places. it's not to, and because the other thing is I go on X all the time because I'm fishing for real stuff. But my God, I have to watch. It's so addictive. Makes my eyes water sometimes. I'm going on a thread where it's almost like I'm in the surface. Like I in the surface is all the floating stuff that's valuable. But if you keep digging deep, it's all these idiotic people fighting each other, falling down, doing fat and stupid things. And and it just becomes
It devolves
garbage.
it's a representation of society where
Yeah.
you have this veneer,
Yeah.
but when you break through the veneer,
Garbage.
society is devolving.
Yeah. And I have to submit myself to it just to see to what extent. Gosh, they don't even know how to fight. You know, all those fight things. They just don't know. Some people are
I the same problems that you and I see with Facebook, I think are eventually going to emerge with X. It may take a few more years, but the thing that I'm noticing is that people in general are angry, are hateful.
yeah.
There's a lot of bigotry going on, and but that's society. I
How
think
can
I think it's a window in what society really is.
so that is
You know?
good to see it if and anybody who is a critical thinker should see it and see it getting worse every day. The other thing too is if you want to understand why Donald Trump can whine and moan about all the Russians and Ukrainians every day that are being killed in the war there, and yet he's literally standing on a pile of 600,000 dead Palestinians in an open, this is day 155 or 156 that the food and water has been cut off. You know, how long, what little meager food is in there. If this goes on for 3 months, we're talking about over 1 million dead just from starvation and thirst. This is going on, folks. You know, in the 40s, people didn't have the access to information that you have. They didn't, even Germans didn't have the access to information to see just how far this had gone. Um, and, but there's a second Holocaust of Semites going on right before your eyes. And you can, if you know how to go, you can go right to the center of it every day and see it happening, as I do. But you have more information access, which should make this a wonderful thing. But if you're an infantile person in an adult body, all this information is useless to you. It's amazing that we have right now, if people were intelligent, they have a way to literally meet everybody in the world and talk like you and I are talking. Everybody in the world can engage everybody. Um, there's so much good that can happen from this. So much transparency that I could dial up somebody in Russia and say, "What's your view on this? How do you live?" And they'll show me, and they'll show me that their cities are not slums and all of that. I mean, I have about I have a company of Russian vloggers that I watch all across Russia and who don't like Putin, who do like Putin, and all that. And I tell you, I'm getting education. And even like Ellie of Russia, from Russia, is one of the best. She actually goes into the slums of Moscow, you know, with a male person with her. But she says, well, let's see what they look like. They say we're all living in a slum, and Moscow is just a Potemkin village of what, 20 million people. How do you make that pull off? And I'm also seeing all these people living in Siberia and Eastern Siberia and all. And what I'm seeing is cities that are improving, you know, that are getting better because Russia's having a boom economy. And if you want to see what you think is happening in Russia, look at America. We are falling apart. You know,
I,
I had to go to the hospital yesterday, and the worst part of it, the not the was the roads were so full of potholes, and I'm having kidney stones, and it's knocking me all over the ambulance, and and I was thinking, yep, this is America. The roads stink, and I'm feeling them right in my kidney stones. So,
I,
um,
I've been in New York for 17 years, and it's New York knows how to market itself, and from the outside looking in, you think it's all nice and shiny, and it's all but once
Moscow
you're
is,
in
New
it,
York isn't.
once you're in it, it's it's a dump.
Is
It is a dump.
I've been going to New York since 1994, and it was still struggling with the dump side, but it was also kind of in a better space than it had been before, and it was improving. It always had that seedy side to it, but now it looks like it's just the seedy side now.
Well, I think that, like pre-Giuliani days, all right,
Yeah,
there was crime,
yeah,
and there was the storefronts had problems and all this stuff.
yeah. It was
But the
tough.
thing is to say, when you saw people walking the street on an average day, and you can see these filmed, I mean, they have it on YouTube,
Yeah,
1980s films of what, and 70s films of what New York was like. It's
I'm watching.
fascinating listening to how they speak too is different.
Yeah.
70s and the early
See,
80s.
I'd watched all those 80s, and then when I went to New York in 94 in November, I was kind of ready to have to watch my shoulder and get tough and know when to run, where to go, who's the guy. And it was totally, because of Giuliani, it was totally, uh, it was great. People were open. I was having some strangers, hey, come with us and go. Well, I went with them. Everything's fine, and it was like, and they were kind of, as New Yorkers are very worldly. They could kind of see, guy, it's not so bad here, like you heard,
Right,
you know.
right.
And they were great people, alive. It's a vital place. I loved going to New York. It's like boom, to boom. It's like
It's
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 happening.
it's
But I've been watching it now in my feeds, and I'm thinking since COVID, it has taken a dive,
yeah. No, it has. It has. I don't think it has recovered.
No,
I
no, it hasn't
They
because
have
that the
recovered
the mind
psychologically.
plague of COVID, the mindset plague that came is still with us,
Yeah.
and it could be the deadliest plague yet. People
Well,
not thinking straight don't make good decisions, and then they go to war and they don't make good decisions, and they think they can fight Taiwan and they can fight Ukraine, and with a navy that has carriers that should have been scrapped 30 years ago. And they think the Chinese are a certain way and the Russians are a certain way, which they are not. You go to war with that, you're in deep trouble. And, I'm thinking if America does, it's almost begging to go. It's like an old bully that just never learns, and he's never had to fight a real fighter. And America's going to knocked on its butt in ways that this country, I've already written about it. I think it's in my previous Hogue Prophecy Bulletin, that I said America is heading for the kind of defeat that America's never experienced in its young life, and hopefully it will mature it. It hasn't totally lost a war like Germany or France. France lost two empires in 1 century, and it took them a while to recover from that. And then they weren't really recovered yet when World War I happened. And they won, but they lost a high number of losses, and then they were really worn out by war. And 20 years later, Germany still had some fight in it and occupied them. So, um, if you don't read the situation right, that's what happens. And America's never been completely knocked on our butt, like France, like Germany. Um, but we're setting ourselves up for it. And I'm hopeful that it'll be an object lesson. Uh, this is so perverse for Americans to be world conquerors. It goes against the very nature of American people, I contend. We're not made to pretend to be policemen of the world. We love our home. Our Cancerian country is about home and hearth. We are naturally isolationist. We should come home. We should dismantle this military industrial complex, which is only needed to govern the world. It looked like Trump was at least giving that lip service, but now he's his biggest weakness, being a very powerful empty channel. He's not channeling. I'd crowd always wise people around him, then he would channel them. But he's got Waltz, who's a dingbat. He's got Hegseth, who's a real examination of immature retardation in a grown man who looks like Dick Tracy, but he's not a super sleuth.
It's interesting you say that he looks like Dick Tracy.
Oh,
So,
it's around. Everybody's talking about his chin,
but
Dick Tracy.
yeah, but there is a level of immaturity
He's
about him.
totally immature.
Yeah,
And he's been a college guy. He's done, as you say, he's one of these byproducts of, push a button, learn something, don't question it, just do it. And he's a child in a man's body. Tulsi Gabbard is struggling, I think, with, as many women have to, is trying to take sides with a man, or, when there's too many men, okay, I'm going to be like one of the men. And she'll have to go through that. She's having quite a learning curve. But she's intelligent. I think she'll get through that. She's been challenged with that before in military and all. But, and I, but, so that's there. Also JD Vance, I see a lot of potential in him. He's still young and he's learning. And, that's the group. Gabbard, Vance, and Witkoff are the people who are still keeping Trump to America first. Let's don't get into these things. Let's get out of these messes other people made for us to. I mean, Europe wants us to do World War II and World War I again. We were smart enough we needed to get into World War One, and we were forced to get into World War II because it came to us.
so
Roosevelt knew that was going to happen.
Vance, JD Vance. I'm not sure if he'd be ready for prime time. In
Well, he's got 4 years,
or three, three and a half,
three
whatever.
and a half years.
But
He's a very intelligent guy, and he has quite his life story, how he grew up. He has potentials, and
he
we'll see. But
he
I
reminds me of Nixon, because Nixon was VP for Eisenhower.
yeah,
He wanted to become president. He was just not ready for prime time.
Nixon in many ways was a great president. If Nixon had not done the Watergate thing,
Right.
frankly, his mistake was, hell, Johnson was taping people. Kennedy was taping people without their knowledge. And he just, if Nixon had not done that, and if Watergate hadn't happened, I think people would consider him one of the greatest presidents we've had. And I know all of his quirks, but I mean, his trilateral diplomacy prevented World War III happening when Russia was seriously considering a nuclear surgical strike on China after the border crisis of 1969. And he stepped in and said, give China, let's take China out of the cold of the Soviet Union not liking it. And that made the Russians have to do trilateral diplomacy. And that started detente. Nixon started detente. And Nixon also, if they had listened to him back in the early in 71, Nixon's idea for solving the welfare problem was a good one. He said, he is a Quaker. There's a lot of that in him about social justice. And his idea, he was, if you want to get people off of welfare, don't when they get a job and you just take the welfare away, most of the time it's less money. So they're not going to want to get off of welfare. You've set it up for them to stay on welfare. Here's what you do. When they get a job, cut welfare by a third for a while and let them get the job and the help and be more encouraged to get jobs. I think it's half, cut it in half. So make the aggregate that if they get off of welfare, they're a complete dependency on welfare, they're in a better space. And they're being productive in the society, they got a job and all of that. And the self-worth of that. And the Democrats basically voted it down because they figured my God, if we do that, Nixon's going to solve the welfare problem and he's going to win a second term. He
There's
did
a,
anyway.
we do have a question I want
Oh,
to.
good. Finally.
This is from Mary. She writes, I'm wondering, I'm not sure if you know about this movie. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. I'm wondering why the movie Bicentennial Man was made. Was it for priming my emotions before this technology really arrived? I haven't seen
I
Bicentennial Man.
have. I have. Um, Interesting question, Mary. Um, I guess the way I took it, watching it, it was more about Williams. What I'm not good with names today. Williams, Nanu Nanu.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Rob, 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 Rob,
Oh, it's spread to you. It must be
yeah, Robert Williams.
Robert. No, not Robert.
Robin Williams.
Robin.
Robin.
Robin Williams. It was. I see what you mean, like making the robot friendly and all that. I don't think it was some cabal to do it. Um, my take of the movie was more about um, his attempt to become something he could never be, and that is a really living being. But he wanted to be, from what I remember of it. Um, yeah, if it was, I don't think it was. I guess I don't. I understand what you're saying. If we make robots nice, well, yeah, you could say data is that way too, and yeah, people, and that's okay for people to like nice and friendly robots. I mean, I love Wally. I love that film. And I thought that film had a great testimony about the future of humanity all being a bunch of
Right.
fat slobs who couldn't do or think anything. It was very, if I ever do a book, sometime I always talk about doing a book called The 50 Most Prophetic Movies Ever Made. Wally is right on my list. So, where they said something about us that really is something we should take a look at. I might do that actually for my book I'm doing of anthologies. I think I will do that. I will put the essay in there. It's a bunch of essays that takes themes all the way, some of them all the way to 4,000 years into the future.
I
And,
mean, there's no place on Earth other than the United States that has such an obesity problem.
oh, it's terrible.
I mean, it's just, and you can, as these individuals get older, they have to have, vehicle support,
Yeah.
where you have these
Yeah.
powered, powered wheelchairs moving around, and you're going to have a big part of society that's going to. I'm starting to once in a while you start seeing this at the restaurants in New York, but the thing is that a larger percentage of the society is going to be falling into this in this strata.
Yeah.
They usually have
And
high BMI, and they can't move around, and they're in these scooters, and that was an element of Wally.
yeah,
When
they're
they
going to be living Wally. The Wally cruise ship is going to be the future, but the robots won't. But at least in Wally, the robots are servants until the wheel robot comes in. Then he's the AI, where the captain has to fight. He comes out with the wheel into the captain's cabin. What do you need, sir? And the wheel spins and does
right,
its stuff and has its light. And he had to find where the deprogram switch was, and to turn him off. And he has the big fight with the wheel and he's going around. He's too fat really to fight that well, but he manages. You are out, boom, like that. It is a story about the humanity ruining itself and coming back home and starting without the machines. And then, in a way, Wally, who was a machine that was benign, and Eva, who's even I have a crush on Eva. But they were programmed to serve people. They were programmed to do good things. To and so it was, I think, a very interesting story that kind of showed robots being our servants, being serving our better side, but they're
right,
not. They're not
right, right.
souls.
Well, I think that there was an element of Steve Jobs in that storyline where
Yeah,
Steve Jobs thought that technology should be subservient to humans, that
yeah,
there needs to be that human element in terms of
yeah,
the user interface, the use of the technology. So there was this that yes, the technology was important, but the thing is that it was that human interface that
yeah,
was key.
yeah. And Steve Jobs
Right.
was a genius, one that
But you,
Musk is not, and that Musk may be even a greater genius, and he's even voiced. He's one of the first people years ago who said, "I'm scared of AI. I think it could destroy us, and it would summon the demon." But he saw it, but he's not checking his actions.
mhm. So if you look at like Sam Altman, is pushing Chat GPT, Open AI crowd. Um, you don't have that. I don't see that human interface, the human element in his in when he's talking about Open AI at all.
Yeah, he summoned his own demon.
Yeah, it's just there's a soullessness about
Yeah.
Sam.
Well, he's the kind of guy that never gets that this one of the stupidest things you can use as a qualifier for intelligence is artificial. And I can only say to him, I wish I had a chance to just sit him down and just say, look, you don't see the oxymoronic qualifier of artificial intelligence, almost true, fake intelligence, pseudo intelligence. It tells me that your wisdom stops and atrophies at intellect. You think intellect is wisdom, and it is not. I have known people on the streets of India who can't even write, who have a lot more wisdom than you can imagine. Um, they're like enlightened people on the street, like Mugga Baba. All he could do was hold a plastic bowl on a street, and people would put things in, take things out, money, whatever, food. And he was around in Jabalpur when Osho was a student, and it was just after he was watching him in 1953, and he Osho became enlightened at 21, and there was one day where he came in the middle of the night and he shooed all the people away around Mugababa. He had to talk to him, so he chased all the people away and left Mugababa alone with his little mugga, his his, his bowl, and Mugababa put the bowl aside and grabbed him, and he rarely spoke, and he grabbed Osho. He said, "I can see you've got what I've got. I can see it's happened to you too. But you must keep studying at the university. You must keep studying." I said, "But I don't want to." He said, I feel like I just want to be silent. Osho never sought to be a master. He ended up being a master of millions of disciples. No other guru has ever had that many disciples. And I'm not talking about TM, and that's kindergarten meditation. Osho is graduate work. I know it's going to upset some of you. Test it. Don't be upset. You're not meditating that deeply if you get your buttons pushed by that. Maybe I'm wrong. Observe it. If you're a meditator, really meditator, you will do that. Rather than react, or then watch your reaction. But so Magababa said, when Osho said, "I just don't want to do college anymore," and then that's when Magababa grabbed him and said, "This is how the story really goes: is you've got to keep going. I know, but I have it, but all I can do is hold this bowl. I can't read. I don't know anything. This happened to me. I can't really help anyone but just radiate it. But you can help people. You can bring them closer to it, and so it's because of Magababa that Osho kept studying in school and had the intellectual tools that are rare for a master. Because you see, Osho said a lot of people get enlightened, but very few become masters. That means that a lot of people get enlightened, they just do the arhat thing. They just go into the purity of it and they don't teach and they just radiate it. And then some of them, if people feel the want to sit with them, they're fine with that. But they don't engage you. They don't help you with all they don't find tricks and ways and devices to help you come to something. All the great masters do that. They are bodhisattvas. They hold on to the world. Like Osho said, my ship has come for me to disappear from all of this ages ago. I'm still here because I set up attachments for myself. Like I want to help people. And he said, it's the trick that Buddha did with his disciples. He said, the most important thing before you're enlightened, become compassionate. And it was his device to prevent his disciples from just disappearing, but actually staying on this shore for a few decades more to help other people come to what is equally their own enlightenment. So it's a trick. Masters are tricky, but not like we trick. They have a reason. They have a device. They will create a situation that the Arhat can't create because they make a point of leaving some attachments left. So that then one being compassion makes you just want to help people. The Arhat, most enlightened people don't help anybody, but masters do. That's what I heard Osho say.
We're getting to that time to wrap it up, but I
Well,
want
thank
to.
you, Mary. At least we had one. Do we have another?
Well, I mean, there were other questions, but
It was too
they
much.
I would
Yeah, thanks.
probably, yeah, I probably prefer not asking it.
Yeah, I'm glad because there was a flow there, and I did have this one. I had a message, and then we kind of went into this whole AI thing. So I think what we were saying, it was probably just good not to do so many questions. Maybe next week it'll be different.
Yeah, but the thing is that I want to remind the audience that in the description box we have a link to John's website. So please click that link, and that will allow you to purchase his periodicals or even sign up for a reading. So before we shut the show down, John, if you could explain, what do they get in a periodical? What is the reading? What's involved? So
One thing you can do is is there's I have samples of my work, free samples to show you what I do, how I write. It's actually a lot different than what I do on these shows. That's a different way. It's more anyway. Check it out, and you can go to hogueprophesy.com, HOGUEPROPHECY.com to see it. But now you can see it on your cell phones, really easy to read, because now that I'm on Premium on X and publishing Premium on X, now you'll get exactly the same thing I put in my website on X. If you type in John Hogue in the search, you will go right to Hogue Prophecy on X, and you will see I'm catching up. Some of the things it took me a while to learn the system, and so now I'm catching up, and I have recaps of 3 of my last Hogue Prophecy reports that you can look at. And also, this week I will be posting my first recent one for April. And so this is a great way to see my stuff. It also has the ways you can join, and it's far more accessible if you go on X to search for me there. Um, and so that's another way. Now, the other way, and I also have the ad at the end of all of that in each one of how you can do a reading with me, a one-on-one, seeing me in this background just with you. And these are on Zoom, and they can be a couple hours. The reading goes deep. because just imagine if you could have, like we've done a couple hours here, just imagine that we could look into the tarot cards, into your astrology, your body mind vehicle of your soul, and see its potentials. And also with things that are deeper than that in the tarot, the Osho Zen Tarot deck is what I use. It makes sense. It's inspired by my master who actually helped Mahadeva Padma create it. Um, and and have a reading with me. Usually it's 5 p.m. Pacific. Uh, so it's pretty easy to be engaged in Central and Mountain Time and Eastern Standard. I do also have times for Europeans and for Britain and Ireland and all that as well. And I can even do I do Australia a lot as well. And if you live in any other place in the world, if you live in Canada, you have the same time zones pretty much, except for the Maritimes. Uh, you can get a reading from me, and um, they're kind of different than what we do with the world. Um, I think they're more. I find that we all have a great time in the reading. It's a lot more. And not, some of the stuff we've been talking about today is about the world, because I'm reading the world in this case. But when I'm reading people, it's a lot of fun, and people are feel very happy and get an interesting view of themselves, and it's very loving. And so, uh, see if you're interested in trying that out. And what will happen is you'll see the link, and it says the link. All you need to do is click on that link. It'll take you to an email box, and all you need to do is put in um, Hogue readings. And all the thousands of, well, hundreds of emails that I get every day, I can see you in the swarm if you just put Hogue reading on it. And then as soon as I see it, I immediately contact you, give you an overview of the reading, the times that are available, and also an instruction on how you can get a free chart from astro.com of your own chart, so you don't have to pay for it. And you can send it to me as a PNG file. And then we set up a time, and then we do it.
I did put in the I did put in the chat the link to John's X channel. So you can click that link and then you can follow him. So please do that. But again, you can also click the link that's in the description of this video and all the videos that I have done with John, and that'll take you to his website so you can sign up for his periodicals and do the reading. So, John, thank you very much for part 33 of this long series.
I thought it was 34. I don't know.
Wait, was it? No, I think it's 33, but maybe it's 34. I
I
thought
think
it
it's 34, but I'm dyslexic, so be
was,
aware of my counting.
no, maybe I got the counting wrong. I don't know, but if it's, I'll update the title if it is 34. But I have it as 33. But yeah, thank you again, John. I thought this conversation it flowed nicely because
Yeah.
we were talking about, most of the show was about the
First hour was about the papal
yeah,
prophecy.
but I think that realizing that technology is pulling us away
Yeah.
from our roots, which are religious roots.
Yes.
You know, mankind has a religious root to it. But if we lose
Absolutely.
that religious root, we devolve, and
Yes.
we start seeing the things that we're starting to see in society.
Yeah.
And so I think that conversation, even though it seemed like they wouldn't match, I think they match pretty well.
I think they match great, and I tell you, these tribulations that the papal prophecies are seeing is part. This crisis with machines is part of it. The machine has no soul. We are different from the machines because we do, but we mostly aren't aware of it. We're not nourished to grow it and make it flower. The seed, if it's not watered, or given food. It's not going to be, it has the potentials. It can lay there for thousands of years. It might as well not exist unless it's actually helped to sprout.
Right, right. Well, with that said, thank you again, John. But before we wrap it up, please say goodbye to everybody. And before we do that, Mary, thank you very much for the question. Greatly
Yes,
appreciate it.
Mary, thank you. Well, all I can say is I love you all and goodbye. Or better, aloha, which means hello and goodbye. It's a circle that's complete.
All right. Well, with that said, thank you very much for the ones that were listening on X Spaces and the ones that were watching the live stream on my website and through YouTube. So we're going to be shutting this down, but John, just stay here. So good night, everybody.